He grasped her hand and tried to smile. "Where is the child?" she asked, in a voice so weak that he could hardly understand her. "She's sleeping at my sister's house," he replied. "It's best that way." She seemed reassured by his answer. "How long have I been asleep?" "For many hours." "Have you been sitting here the whole time?" "You must rest." "In a few days, I won't need to lie here any longer." "I've been sleeping," he replied. "Soon you're going to be well again." He wondered whether she knew he was lying, whether she knew she would never get up again. Were both of them lying to each other in their despair to make the inevitable easier? "I'm so tired," she said. "You must sleep so you'll get well," he answered, turning his head at the same time so she wouldn't see his face. Soon the first light of dawn seeped in. She had slipped into unconsciousness again. He was so tired that he could no longer control his thoughts. He had met Dolores when he was 21. He and his brother Juan walked the long road to Santiago de los 30 Caballeros to see the carnival. Juan, who was older, had visited the city once before, but it was Pedro's first time. It took them 3 days to get there. Once in a while they got a ride for a few kilometers with an ox and cart, but they walked most of the way. At last they reached their destination. It was a February day, and the carnival was in full swing. Astonished, Pedro had stared at the garish costumes and the terrifying masks of devils and animals. The whole city was dancing to the beat of thousands of drums and guitars. Juan piloted him through the streets and alleys. At night they slept on benches in the Parque Duarte. Pedro was afraid that Juan would disappear into the swirling crowds. He felt like a child frightened of losing his parents. But he didn't let on. He didn't want Juan to laugh at him. On their last evening, Juan did suddenly vanish among the costumed, dancing people. They hadn't agreed on a place to meet if they were separated. Pedro searched for Juan all night. At daybreak, he stopped by the fountain in the Plaza de Cultura. A girl about his own age sat down beside him. She was the most beautiful girl he had ever seen. He watched as she took off her sandals and rubbed her sore feet. When she met his gaze, he lowered his eyes, embarrassed. That was how he met Dolores. They sat by the fountain and started talking. Dolores had been looking for work as a housekeeper, going from house to house in the rich neighborhood without success. She, too, was a child of a campesino, and her village was not far from Pedro's. They left the city together, plundered banana trees for food, and walked more and more slowly the closer they came to her village. 2 years later they were married and moved into a little house in Pedro's village. Pedro worked on a sugar plantation while Dolores grew vegetables and sold them. They were poor, but they were happy. Only one thing was not as it should be. After 3 years, Dolores was not yet pregnant. They never talked about it, but Pedro sensed Dolores's increasing anxiety. Without telling him, she had visited some curiositas on the Haitian border to seek help. 8 years passed. And then one evening, when Pedro was returning from the sugar plantation, Dolores met him on the road and told him she was pregnant. At the end of the 8th year of their marriage, she gave birth to a daughter. When Pedro saw his child for the first time, he could see at once that she had inherited her mother's beauty. That evening Pedro went to the village church and made an offering of some gold jewelry his mother had given him. Then he went home, singing so loudly and fervently that the people he met thought he had drunk too much rum. Dolores was asleep. She was breathing harder and stirred restlessly. "You can't die," whispered Pedro, no longer able to control his despair. "You can't die and leave me and our child." 2 hours later, it was all over. For a brief moment, her breathing grew completely calm.